I want to thank everybody for coming today. I'm going to be chairing the meeting as Robert couldn't make it today. So yeah, I welcome everybody. So before we get started, I would like to do a land acknowledgement. So we'd like to acknowledge that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories upon which we were located. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that our watershed forms a part of the treaty and traditional territory of the Southeastern Anishinaabe. It is on these ancestral and treaty lands that we live and work. To honor this legacy, we commit to being stewards of the natural environment and undertake to have a relationship of respect with our treaty partners. Okay, so everybody's had a look at the agenda. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda? Tracy? Kriya? Any additions, anything want added? No, all in favor? Carried, great. Okay, any declarations of pecuniary interest? None noted. Okay, and I assume everybody's read the minutes of our previous meeting. So can I have a motion to adopt those minutes? Okay, Eric and Peter, all in favor? Carried, great. Okay, so is any business arising from the minutes? Anybody have any questions? Nope. Okay, that's good. Well, today's a special day because we have Sue Shikazi from the health unit who is going to do a presentation. So take it away, Sue. Welcome.
Thanks. It's kind of funny to have my back to people, but all right, you got my back. Thanks. So thank you so much for having me. I am Sue Shikazi. I'm a health promoter at the HKPR District Health Unit. I work out of our Haliburton office. And since 2018, I've been the lead on the health unit's work on climate change and health. So in 2018, the Ontario Public Health Standards, which direct our work, had a new program that directed us to do some research on the health impacts of climate change within our district. So that's what I'm here to talk to you today about. So I think Melanie is just getting things loaded here.
Oh, it's a PDF. So just have to scroll down.
Oh, okay. Okay. Sure.
There you go. As long as I can read.
So is there a reason that it's, oh, there we go. So today I'm going to give a very brief overview of the connection between climate change and health, talk a little bit about the work that we've done on an assessment, the phase 1 report, a little bit about vulnerability, what climate change and health looks like in HKPR district, a bit about adaptation, action, and what's next. So climate change is typically framed as an environmental issue. And it's more recent that the connections between climate change and health have sort of become more prominent. And so at a global level, certainly there's been the Lancet report for the last, I want to say half a dozen years at least, there's been a specific report on the health impacts of climate change, and it's updated annually. And also the World Health Organization recognizes that climate change is a really significant public health impact. At a national level, our Chief Public Health Officer, Dr. Teresa Tam, she releases a report every year. And last year's report was all about the role of public health in relation to climate change, and saying that, you know, because climate change threatens the planet, impacts the environment, it also is going to have an impact on all of us and our health. So I'm curious about why there should be something on top of that, but it's not there.
What do you mean by something?
Well, so see how there's text on top of a little image? Yeah, so there should be some text there as well. Any thoughts on why that is?
You are screen sharing.
Yeah, sort of like here, there should be a text box on there as well.
It's not on this version either.
Oh, well, that's too bad. Well, what this would have said is that, as I said earlier, the Ontario Public Health Standards direct all local public health units to do climate change, health vulnerability, and adaptation assessment. And so what that looked like for us is to look at climate data locally, what the historic climate data was, what the current climate picture is, and what the projections are for climate in the future. And we looked at a few different climate indicators, things like maximum daily temperatures, nighttime temperatures, precipitation. Those were the sort of key climate indicators. And then also looked at health indicators as well. And we looked at 6 climate-related hazards. So those are identified in the report. We looked at extreme temperatures, both heat and cold, extreme weather and natural events. So that would include things like tornadoes, snowstorms, heavy precipitation, and weather-related events like floods, droughts, wildfires, those kinds of things. Vector-borne diseases with a focus on West Nile virus and Lyme disease in particular, and the insects that carry those. The impacts to food and water safety, the impacts to air quality, and exposure to solar ultraviolet radiation. So those are the climate-related hazards that we looked at and how they potentially could be impacting on health. So the phase 1 report was completed in June of this year and was released. And there's an executive summary that's available. The full report is also available. It's pretty long, but if anybody's interested in reading that, they're both available on our website on the climate change page. So we do have an updated page as well. So the assessment itself, the phase 1 report, looked at, as I said, climate, health, and the third piece of it was vulnerability. So we know that just like with the COVID-19 pandemic, everybody was impacted by it, but there were certain groups of people that were more significantly impacted than others for a whole range of reasons. And so really what we wanted to look at with this assessment was who in our population is likely to be more at risk of experiencing negative health outcomes due to the impacts of climate change. And what does that mean to us as a health unit in terms of our programs and services and how they might need to adapt in order to ensure that those people are as protected as possible? And also, what does that mean in our communities? Because the health unit can't do everything to protect people's health. There's a role to play with organizations like Kawartha Conservation, our municipalities, and other community agencies as well, who work directly with those who are more at risk. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about what contributes to making people more at risk or vulnerable. And really it's a function of 3 things. There's exposure, sensitivity, and adaptive capacity. So sensitivity means things as an individual that might make you more prone to a health impact. So it could be your age, older adults. If you're older, more likely to be impacted by things like extreme heat, for example. If you also have a chronic condition like a heart condition or a respiratory condition, that's going to make you more likely to experience some negative health impacts as well. People who are pregnant, risk of negative pregnancy outcomes during things like extreme temperatures. So that's the sensitivity component. Exposure is the degree to which you may be exposed to those climate hazards. So again, if we think about something like extreme heat, people who live in housing that's, might be substandard, doesn't have air conditioning, and there's living on a 5th floor of an apartment building during an extreme heat event, they're more likely to experience high indoor temperatures. So they're going to be more at risk. And then when you layer those things on top of one another, so you have an older adult, heart condition, lives alone in an apartment, top floor, no air conditioning, you can see how these things sort of compound and can add to their vulnerability to those extreme heat events. The other aspect of exposure is the sort of social and systemic contexts that we operate within. So social determinants of health include things like income, so people living in poverty more likely to be at risk, disability, gender identity. These things again contribute to the situations that people live in because of the sort of systemic issues like racism, discrimination, colonialism that kind of put people that create situations where it's difficult for people to be healthy. So there's kind of the immediate environment that people live in, and then the sort of system that they exist within as well. So there's a list of the climate hazards that we looked at, as I said. And in terms of health impacts, what you see on the right-hand side are some of the potential health impacts that we think that we might see given the current climate trajectory that we are on. So more likely to see an increase in emergency department visits because of things like heat-related illness, food safety, food-related illnesses, and waterborne illnesses. And in fact, I was just speaking with a family physician today, and she told me that she has seen this year lots more ear infections, impetigo, skin infections in her patients. And she'll ask them, have you been swimming? And they'll say yes. And so, the connection between those bacteria and things that are in the water, seeing that a lot earlier in the season. Typically that stuff doesn't show up until August when the water's warmer, but warmer temperatures, warmer water, conditions for those kinds of things to thrive. So that's just one example. More injuries due to floods and extreme weather events, worsening of chronic illnesses, as I said earlier, poor birth outcomes, an increase in Lyme and other vector-borne diseases, increased risk of lung cancer, and that's an air quality piece, and increased incidence of skin cancer. That's due to increased exposure to solar radiation. And there's also a large body of evidence that talks about the mental health impacts of climate change, whether it be sort of at a sort of broader scale, things like people just being anxious about their future due to climate change, but also climate events like extreme heat can have a negative impact on people who have a mental health issue. So what that means is we need to take action now to address these vulnerabilities and put policies and programs and strategies in place to ensure that people are as resilient and adapted as possible. So the good news is that there's a lot of work that we already do at the health unit that contributes to adaptation. And so some of these things are addressing the direct impacts that we see now. So for example, the monitoring and surveillance of ticks and mosquitoes that we do helps us to keep track of the range of those insects, the frequency, and where they're found. And of course, what we're seeing over time every year is an increase in the range of black-legged ticks that carry Lyme disease. So, we just expect that that's going to continue to grow as time goes on. We test recreational beach water. We do lots of public outreach and education, skill building to make people aware of the things that they can do themselves to protect themselves and their families during extreme heat, for example, or when there's poor air quality or from ticks and mosquitoes. And then there's more bigger picture initiatives that we work on in public health, things like advocating for healthy policies related to how our communities are designed and built, and around transportation, those kinds of things. We do emergency planning and preparedness, and we also are involved in poverty reduction work, which is really, trying to get at the root cause of vulnerability. If people have enough money to afford good housing and good food, they're likely to be healthier. That builds resilience. But climate and health adaptation needs to be a collaborative effort because, as I said earlier, we can't do this work alone. And so it requires collaboration across multiple sectors. And so it's really great to be able to talk to you about the work that we're doing. And I see lots of opportunity to connect with Kawartha Conservation. I know that you're working on an updated climate change plan. So I hope that there's opportunities to sort of, find some synergies in the work that we do, because we don't want to duplicate, but we also, I think, I hope that the work that we do at the health unit can contribute to the work that Kawartha Conservation is doing and vice versa. And I know that there's already collaboration that happens between Kawartha Conservation and the health unit, for example, around the promotion of blue-green algae. We also, so collaborative climate health action, here's some examples of what that looks like, some ways that we collaborate with our municipalities, with community agencies and organizations. We've participated in the development of our local climate change plans. We make comments and reviews and on land use and community design from a public health perspective, also around transportation. I mentioned emergency planning and poverty reduction. We also have staff that are involved with partners around agriculture and local food and local food sustainability. And of course, around education and awareness raising, we collaborate as well. So the next steps, we do have a communications plan that's in process. So the phase 1 report was launched in June. And as I said, we do have a web page that's devoted to climate change. So it's on our website, and feel free to have a look at that. And the other thing that I'm doing now is, sort of reconnecting and rebuilding the partnerships and relationships that were sort of put on hold due to our focus on the pandemic for the last few years. So again, it's really great to be able to come and speak with you today. And what I'm doing now is working on an adaptation action plan for the health unit, which will take the findings from the assessment and identify what that means to us at the health unit in terms of our work and services. So what is it that we're already doing to build adaptive capacity? What else could we be doing? Or how could we adjust our programs to be more, to strengthen our focus on building climate resilience? And also, how can we support partners in the community in the work that they do to address adaptive capacity as well. So that's the work that I'm doing now. And a very rough timeline, aiming to have a draft completed by the end of the year. And there's engagement happening now. This is a great example of that. So that's kind of the targeted timeline. And just a note about what you can do, I do encourage you to share the executive summary and key findings with your colleagues at your municipalities and help build awareness of the links between climate change and health. Because as I said, I think the narrative largely has been related to climate change and the environment. I think there's a really great opportunity to raise awareness of how climate change impacts health, because I think it makes it more personal to people. When you see, if you feel the impacts of a smoke event, or you have a child with asthma that gets worse because of an extreme heat event or smoke, it personalizes it a little bit, and I think has the potential to perhaps make climate change more real to people by bringing it home, so to speak. And there was something there too, but you can check our website, hkpr.on.ca/climate change, and all the information is there.
Great, thanks, Sue.
Happy to take any questions if there are any.
Great, and any questions? Yes.
Through the chair.
Yep.
On your website, would I be able to find the data that you're using for comparisons and the projections, and how far back would that data be accurate?
Yeah, you can. So if you look at in the full report, which is the lengthy document, There's all sorts of graphs and charts that show the climate data, which actually was taken from a really great website called climatedata.ca. And it shows the historic temperature, sort of current temperature, and then projections based on a couple of different emissions scenarios. So that, like, there's graphs for temperature, there's graphs for precipitation. Yeah, that's where you'd find that, and the link to that report is on our website.
Lots of data. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes. Peter.
I was just wondering what kind of coordination there is between the health units. Because in our watershed, there is several health units.
Right, good question. So I do connect with colleagues in Peterborough who are doing similar work. Is that where so you'd be part of Peterborough Public Health? Yeah, so they're working on their assessment, and we, among colleagues in public health, we talk a lot about our approaches and sharing of resources and that kind of thing. So I have some back and forth with the folks in Peterborough for sure.
Eric?
Through you, the one thing that I would just say quickly is just that personalization piece is so key. It's the big conundrum we have, right? It's just preaching to the choir, right?
Yeah.
Everybody here is advocates for things that we know are right. And in the community, it's so easy to, for so long, it's been those left wingers who say there's a problem.
Yeah.
It's so easy to dismiss it as, the earth will repair itself again. We've been through all the different things we hear. And it's interesting. I'm always looking for that touchstone that it's just simple, an increase of ticks. We all see it, right? We know for sure those lines, and that's something that even the most right-wing individual who maybe isn't as concerned will go, yeah, I have experienced that. It's interesting. I like to think more about that because it's very simple. We need those simple connections for our constituents and the people in our lives to explain.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's very easy to dismiss as a big world problem. And as soon as you do that, just in your car and driveway, right?
Yep.
And I'm guilty. That's what I do as well. I'm flawed too. I will get in my car at 4 o'clock, and if I'm not careful, by 5 o'clock, I'm not thinking about this meeting. I'm thinking about my next meeting. And so those touchstones are the ones to sort of, gotta remember that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what I plan to include in the adaptation action plan are some of those more concrete messages that we and others can share in order to strengthen that awareness about the link between climate change and health, and how it's already affecting us. And I think the tick range thing is good because it's so graphic. I mean, you can show in the report, the full report, there's a map from 2017 and there's a map from 2022. And the range expansion in that 5 years is really quite dramatic. So.
Any other questions or comments? I just had one for the Bob Cajun Beach. It was closed, and we put the fountain back in, so everybody was really hopeful that was going to clean the water. Well, it didn't, and to have it closed so early in the season, it was a real eye opener too. So those sort of simple everyday things that you take for granted. Yeah. So yes.
Madam Chair, if I could, thanks for coming in. I certainly appreciate it. I see lots of good synergies between the good work that you've done and some of the updates that we're looking to for our climate change strategy. I was just looking at the PDF, and it's a PDF, so there might have been some translation between PowerPoint and PDF maybe that occurred, but maybe what we can do is we can connect with you and then get a version that has all the information on it, and we can forward it on to the board with the executive summary attached.
Yeah, my apologies for that. Maybe that was, I maybe should have looked at the PDF before I sent it.
Kriya, did you have something?
I just remembered, during your presentation, something that an angle that the Kawartha Lakes Conservation Authority is taking is with mental health in the conservation authorities. And I think that's a really important one, and that other conservation authorities would do well to pick up on, because that is a huge one, the anxiety and so on. So there is a place in the natural environment to address that very serious health issue.
Yeah, for sure. And there's also lots of research just about the mental health benefits of being outside in the natural environment. Yeah.
Anything else? Great, well, thank you for coming, and I'm
Thank you.
sure we're going to see more of you, I hope, and
Yes.
in a committee going forward, so that's exciting. And can I get a motion to receive Sue Shikazi's presentation? Harold? Seconder? Eric? All in favor? Carrie, great, thanks
Thanks so much.
again. Okay, so we're on to 6. So presentations and applicable actions items, 6.1 climate change strategy, John Chambers.
Will actually be myself and Nathan here.
Okay.
Nathan, who will be sitting up here with me.
Near the mic.
And Nathan.
Hello, everyone.
Oh, sure.
So just, I'm gonna take a picture.
So we're all gonna
Okay.
get around then? or-
Because Nathan's.
that what you
mom was- that'd be.
Oh, Nathan's mom.
Or just them?
So the
Like,
background is Nathan's mom is really proud of him.
Oh,
Hey, mom, it's here for mom.
there we go.
Just wanted to take-
Hi, Mom.
And make his mom proud.
Oh, that's great.
There you go.
Aw.
And I'll get one.
Assume that theologian look going for yourself.
There we go.
There we go. Thank you.
No gang signs.
Never.
Great, well, take it away, John and Nathan.
Thank you very much. Through you, Madam Chair, and the members of the board. Honestly, it is very difficult to follow Sue. That was a tremendous presentation, so thank you. We launched this climate change strategy update back in the spring, late winter, early spring. And really what we wanted to do through this process was to focus on the great work that had been accomplished throughout the last climate change strategy and working with Nancy and her team in IWM and with Mark and his support. What we did was sort of take a look at what worked really well with the last strategy, and then decided to look at expanding that out to a 10-year strategy moving forward. The challenge with doing a shorter strategy is things are changing so rapidly. You would be constantly just trying to acquire the new information and come up with a new approach. So we wanted to come up with a plan that would be very fluid, very adaptable. Rather than pigeonholed to accomplish X, it's really, we want to identify what are the gaps, what don't we know, what do we know, how do we apply that information in relevant terms. So I think we do here, press this forward. Maybe, no, yes. How does this one work?
Try playing backwards.
Technology.
You gotta love technology.
Good when it works. Nathan, you're just gonna have to take it away.
Take it over, Nathan. Well, while we're waiting on this, so just by way of background, one of the first things we did was we got together in this room with all of our staff and really just wanted to get thoughts and feedback from all of the staff members. We have a number of experts throughout the organization focused on different areas, as you're well aware, whether that's stewardship or CA lands or integrated watershed management. So we wanted all of those differing opinions and thoughts to be able to contribute to this plan moving forward. So we took all of that feedback, and Nathan and I developed a survey that we then sent out to our community. It was important to sort of get a representative view from across our watershed. Here we go.
There we go.
So in March, we held our first internal working group session, followed by the launch of our public survey to solicit input. And that survey was based around a few different things. One, it was based around the input we received from our staff internally. Additionally, it was based on, we took a concerted effort to look at all of our member municipality climate change strategies, healthy environment plans, what plans we already have internally, what plans are external. Certainly the timing of the health units plan played an important role as well in being able to develop that survey. And then we sent it out and we had a great response from the community. We ended up with 171 survey responses across, as you can see, the various areas. We did it based on municipality and then whether that was rural or urban. So just by way of background, in terms of being statistically relevant, we based our survey on a population of 250,000 and applying an industry standard of 95% confidence level and a 7% margin of error. We're well within our statistically relevant sort of area with the 170 plus responses. So we had a great response from Kawartha Lakes, from Brock, from Scugog, Trent Lakes, and a few from Cavan there as well. The two big things that came out of this, there was a lot of differing opinions, a lot of great feedback from the people who responded. The two things that stood out the most was, number one, how concerned are you about the impacts of climate change locally? And we were very specific to sort of target local people and local attitudes, obviously. And 107 responses, or 63%, were very concerned. So what that basically translates to, 63% very concerned, 19% moderately concerned, 2% somewhat concerned, and 16 said they were not concerned at all. On the second piece of that, much again, similar to what Sue had said, in terms of synergies working together, one of the key pieces of information that came out of this survey sort of over and over again with the various responses was how important was collaboration and working together with different levels of government, different organizations, different community groups. And 64% again came back with extremely important, 16% very important, 8% moderately important. So overall, 90% said collaboration with municipal business and community partners was slightly to extremely important. One of the other things we looked at was, to your point, Councillor Smeaton, we wanted to find a way to resonate those messages with different audiences. It wasn't just about climate change from an environmental standpoint. It was, how does it impact me as an individual, whether that's through agriculture, through business, through senior citizens. So we also looked at it with an economic development standpoint, sort of a tourism initiative through Kawartha Lakes and Durham region, and what happens when the quality of lakes isn't what it used to be, or how does that impact tourism sort of moving forward. So where we sort of focused was we wanted to get an idea from people across various areas what their most important things were. And interestingly, we basically asked for 5 areas. We gave people a list of what it was, 10 or 12 or 15, depending on the subject. And the ones that came back as the highest values were extremely high. They were very consistent across the board. So in the case of agriculture, examining the impacts of woodlot removal on the watershed, pesticides on source water, invasive species, and severity of weather events. Those came back as overwhelmingly areas we want to know about, we want to focus on, we want to see how this impacts us on a local level. Looking at from a people standpoint, education and awareness were overwhelmingly, people want to know how they're impacted, what they can do, how they can get more information. So that was something we were already focusing on a lot internally, certainly a lot with our messaging and things like that. this was a great indication that it's something we need to focus more on, spend more time on, and really create a concerted strategy and plan to move forward with that. So education awareness about people's activities on lakes and lake health, what that relationship is, education around the role of wetlands in climate change adaptation and mitigation, source protection. When we looked at the environment, specifically protecting water sources, lakes, rivers, and streams, tree planting and trees came up a lot. People wanted more urban tree planting. They wanted more rural tree planting, and how that tie into the impact of greater canopy cover and various things impact, whether it's reducing temperature in an urban setting, for example. And then, of course, native species of plants, trees, animals being outcompeted as more southern species migrate north, and that would go sort of hand in hand with, as you see the ticks migrating further north. And then the economic development and tourism, and how, what we can do about promoting and education about low impact developments, monitoring how changing lakes and water resources could and will impact the watershed economy. Increasing data collection. Our integrated watershed management team collects a vast amount of information. It's now how do we take that information and make that relevant to people and in a tangible sense. So recently, and I haven't included it in this slide, but we recently, a couple of weeks ago, you may have seen, did a social media graphic, and it was just the amount of precipitation we received in the Kawartha watershed this spring in relation to historical events. So it's one thing to be able to go historically, this is precipitation, but we really wanted to focus on, this is just our local. We have, a station in Trent Lakes, for example. We have a station at Emily Park. We have a station at Port Perry and Blackstock, and here at Ken Reed. And it was just a simple graphic designed in sort of a larger or smaller bubble sense of, here's the spring season, here's a large bubble. So Blackstock got 168% of its average spring total, whereas a place like Emily Provincial Park or Pigeon River got, about normal. So how extremely localized these severe weather events are becoming, and then how that impacts across a broader sense.
Just ask you a question. I noticed that too when I was going through the thing. And is that an anomaly? Is that accurate? Could that have been a data error or something? Do you think it seemed, extraordinarily bizarre to like 6 miles away, Port Perry was at what percent? And
Atmospheric river.
100%.
I am going to let either Nancy or Nathan answer that as far as the technology and how that gets monitored.
So we have in the past historically, Blackstock tends to be tends to get a lot of precipitation in that one site. If it was an anomaly, we've noticed it over and over again. So I don't know if it's just a whole, if it's close, I don't know. There's no explanation, but it is one of our stations that gets the most.
Would that be an atmospheric river? Like we used to call them atmospheric lakes, but they call them atmospheric rivers now. So would that come into play where it just, it just sits there, the cloud, and just rains and rains and rains and rains?
Potentially. I know Rob, who is heading up our flood forecasting right now, he says it's just that area. For some reason, it's getting a lot of rain.
I can agree with that. It definitely, you do see a large amount in Blackstock, whereas, you move just a little west or even a little north and you don't see nearly as much. So it's definitely interesting data to see.
It's not based on elevation or anything.
I wouldn't say so. The elevation doesn't change all that much. And from what, at least for me, I haven't seen any discrepancies in terms of elevation and, amounts of precipitation. But yeah, that's a good point to bring up too.
Well, they always call it the ridge, right? So
Yeah, the ridges.
There is some more graphic uplift when you do have elevation change. I notice it just driving over ridges every day. You do end up with some more clouds, not near as noticeable with mountains or things like that, but there is, I could tell there's a little bit of a difference, you know, between Brooklyn, Port Perry and Lindsay. There's almost 3 different kind of categories of localized kind of microclimates that are there. So certainly climbing the ridges, you get fog a lot, you know, that has some moisture to it. The exact result of all that, though, is kind of interesting. So I think some that we're noticing and that might need to go more to try to figure out exactly why that is. And one of the things that we've been kind of talking about a little bit is understanding the weather patterns a little bit more, which is why we have the climate change, citizens climate change group going in order to try and figure out what some of these localized patterns are showing relative to, you know, the kind of sparse, I would call it, data across the watershed, where we have these, you know, really good detailed precipitation monitoring gauges, but we know that we're not hitting a lot of things. And it's something that across the CA network, we're seeing all the time, where there's like the Peterborough flood, extremely localized. It actually ran through Omimi as well, the one storm, the first one. And it was just a very narrow band of thunderstorms that just hit all the way through and then stalled over Peterborough in our area, just kind of moved through. But it's something that we have been noticing and just need to look at, figure out the tracks of storms too, because those seem to be changing. So it's I think it's probably a combination of things that are probably not very well understood at this point in time.
So Mark, is that an atmospheric lake where it just stalls and it just sits there and lets go? Like, where's that language? I remember when we were first doing a climate look, and that's what was in the report was atmospheric lakes, but now they call them atmospheric rivers.
Yeah, I know there's a whole kind of emerging science around the atmospheric rivers and trying to actually create some criteria, maybe even around what the risk behind atmospheric rivers are and the potential rainfalls or storms that are associated with them. I think the only thing that we can say at this point is it's probably a result of the warm weather and the you know, result of trying to get rid of all the energy in the system, because that's where rain falls. At that point, it's just a matter of the really quick moving storms because it is so isolated. But aside from that, yeah, I think we need to probably take a look at it a little bit more.
I certainly think there's some excellent opportunities there. One of the things we noticed with that graphic, for example, was in terms of just from a communication standpoint, the engagement, the reach, we got more out of that one post across different audiences, Facebook, LinkedIn, what have you, than we have over, you know, a large number of posts in the last 2 or 3 months. So the amount of interest, if we had just done, say, here's Ontario, here's the amount of rain versus, you know, whatever, it probably would not have done nearly as well. As soon as you start to localize it and put it in perspective for people. But I do know there was a situation, as Mark will well remember, last summer in Port Perry. We have 2 monitoring stations in Port Perry, about, I think, 2 kilometers apart. One recorded no precipitation, and one, it was like a extreme weather event and flooded half the downtown. So it can be that sort of that localized. So I think that's, you know, again, going back to the economic development, the tourism aspect, and how the patterns are changing or where those patterns are occurring, especially for an economic driver, I think will, you know, play a large role moving forward as well. And then from a greenhouse gas standpoint, you know, again, tree planting came up as one of the big items for that. You know, it was perhaps less about, you know, let's make sure you change light bulbs appropriately, you know, every year to a more, you know, low energy use light bulb, and more of a sort of almost a bigger picture of what can we do that impacts sort of regionally, you know, on a local community level and that sort of thing. From a transparency and reporting standpoint, again, people wanted information. They wanted knowledge to be able to understand and make better decisions. So annual reporting on tree planting, both urban and rural and by municipality across the watershed. annual reporting on precipitation, sort of the visual trends as we had just done with the spring season. And then, of course, the reporting on flood and low water education outreach, and then developing a web-based dashboard of climate change related information for the website. So the next steps for our plan, Nathan and I, along with the other staff throughout Kawartha Conservation, will be developing the draft strategy, which we will then circulate to our staff internally first for them to review and provide some input and some feedback. We will take that input and feedback and further refine the strategy and present to this board the 10-year draft climate change strategy at the September board meeting. After we receive your feedback, then we will be going out for a second round of public engagement and then presenting to you a final strategy for board approval at the November meeting to launch in 2024. And then from a reporting standpoint, much like you see in your agenda packages today, how we do the Q reports or the quarterly reports, we would look at something very similar for updating on climate change actions, whether that's on a quarterly basis or an annual basis moving forward.
Just on that, John, quickly, the City of Kawartha Lakes has the Healthy Environment Plan that we're hoping to roll out, and that the Environmental Advisory Committee, that's one of their tasks this year, is to make that happen. So going forward, it'd be really great to work closely with the health unit and the city and maybe even the region. And Trent Lakes, you know, to have a more fulsome discussion and actions.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things Nathan and I really wanted to accomplish throughout this process is a couple different things. One, tailored solutions. So what we recognize is what's happening in Scugog, for example, is not entirely the same as what's happening in, say, Trent Lakes, whether that's from a precipitation standpoint. The needs of the communities might be different. It might be easier to, say, plant trees in one place and fewer trees in another. So looking at a watershed basis, it's not necessarily a one size fits all. So when we roll out the draft strategy, it's not necessarily going to say, for the sake of argument, let's plant 20,000 trees a year in the watershed. It might say, you know, for the sake of argument, look at the recommendations of the member municipalities' goals, their targets, their tree planting initiatives. How can we support that? And then look at our internal programming. Maybe we need to plant 30,000 trees a year. Maybe, you know, maybe you can plant 20 and you lose 25 in a Derico and you're still at a net 5,000. So, you know, we need to be able to be sort of fluid with a plan to adapt and assist our member municipalities. And you've already done great work throughout your individual plans as it is. Of course, the other big thing would be to recognize that there's all sorts of, you know, new and unforeseen challenges related to climate change. We're seeing things this year that we didn't see last year, the year before that. So trying to come up with a plan that will address things we don't even know about yet. So we really want to create something that is tangible, it's actionable, it does not replicate or duplicate or you know, replace any of the great work that's already been done. It's taking those assets and those resources and the work that's already been contributed and sort of putting it under one roof so that we can move forward and support our member municipalities and support the communities through the work that Kawartha Conservation does. As Sue had mentioned during her presentation, you know, the health unit doesn't do everything, it can't do everything, and every organization has a role to play, but everything ties in. So we don't do beach testing, you know, necessarily, but the health of water is something we do look at. So how can we all sort of work together with our various plans to make sure that we are you know, doing the best work we possibly can?
Yeah, Eric?
Just gonna say that through you,
this is very cool stuff. And for me, the theme of the day is, again, personalizing climate change. And so what's interesting in this particular conversation is that by personalizing that climate change now becomes significantly raised at the table of economic development. It's no longer, it's actually an impetus now. And so if all goes well, and what I find cool about this is it encourages looking at watershed as the template for economic development for an area, as opposed to what does Omimi need, what does Bob Cage need, what's Finland need. Now, I'm not naive. We're always going to prioritize what does a community need, because that's our job. And that's how cities function. And you referred to that kind of as well. But that is a very cool train of thought, to look at watershed as one of the key motivators for industry at the table of economic development. And climate change now becomes a right-wing attachment as opposed to what those left would be.
Absolutely.
Very good. How to sell the product, right?
Well, and we see that, you know, whether it's climate change or through our other programming. One thing that we have noticed, we spend a great deal of time on analytics and understanding what messaging works and what resonates and what doesn't work. And we have learned concretely, there is no one size fits all messaging. So we spend a great deal of time on determining who are our audiences, where's our audience, how do they get their information, what information do they want, how do they want to receive that? Is it a video? Is it a graphic? Is it a tweet? Is it a simple statement? Is it a question? People respond differently across the board. So by being able to really understand where those audiences are, and then what it is they want, then we tailor those individual messages and put it out to those groups. And we find, you know, the ability to get our messaging out there is, you know, significantly greater than, you know, just that throw a message out there and hope it sticks. So.
And that's exactly what Kawartha Lakes is doing right now. We're undertaking that. Whereas people looking for their information? How do we better serve them, right? Because as we grow, we've got to tailor those specific messages for everyone.
You have a sort of a declining traditional media sources, and even the media sources we do have are obviously shrinking in their footprint. So again, you can't rely on that one size fits all.
And you become your own news purveyor.
Yes.
Right? That's where everybody's going. So you want to be the hub for people to find it.
Yeah, it's one of the things we've focused on greatly here for probably the last 4 or 5 years anyway, was, you know, sort of you always keep the media in mind, but we're our own publishing entity. We put out the messaging we want to put out on the platforms we want it out on, when we want it out there. If traditional media picks it up, which at the current rate, 90% of the time they do anyway. But even if they don't, we have the SEO in place. We have all that. You go to Google, you type in your search, and we're still coming up. So, you know, we're not having to rely on our message even being filtered through another source. You just focus on your own publishing entity and going from there.
Great. Okay. Peter.
Yeah, through the chair. I'd like to pick one comment. 28 people out of 270 that think climate change has an impact on their lives. It's unfathomable. You know, it's been in the media for, you know, the last year or two, how much climate change has impacted all of our lives and all aspects of our lives. And I just can't believe that 28 people have their head in the sand.
That's probably from the oil.
It's not going to affect me in my lifetime, so why should I worry about it?
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. Any other questions for John?
Or Nathan?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
I just have
Anyone?
one
Yeah, Kriya?
comment. It sounds to me that when people wanted reporting back, for instance, on the number of trees that were planted, is that the conservation authorities are being held accountable for their role in climate change, and that there will be some focus on how well and how attentive and responsive the CA is.
I would say, looking at the responses we received, and there was a number of spots throughout the survey where we asked people, you know, type in your questions or information or your thoughts or your feedback. My sense would be less about accountability of the conservation authority as much as a genuine interest of what's happening in my community I saw your post that, yes, you planted 8,000 trees at this event on the weekend,
Okay.
but how is that impacting my little corner of the world? And was it here? And so I think people just, again, that visualization of where that's happening and how it's happening within their own communities.
Don't I agree with what Eric said, that people are really personalizing it now, and their avid level of interest. So that's to that point.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Way to go, Nathan. Yay. Okay, I need a motion to receive. Tracy and Kriya, all in favor? Carried, great. Okay, so now we're on to 6.2 and Mark, you're on.
Yeah, and so this is an overview of the 2024 budget. John Lucas, our acting director of corporate services, who really is the one that creates the budget and kind of drives the process with the leadership team. He has a presentation that kind of is similar to the correspondence that you'll see a little bit later in the agenda, but distilled quite a bit and then made more applicable to our business. So John is going to present on that, and then we do have a staff report that's attached.
Okay,
as well.
great. Thank you.
Everybody's been sitting, so I'll follow trend. Awesome. Through Madam Chair, thanks for allowing me to provide a update on the budget process and some of the regulation changes. So we're going to switch it up a bit from climate change, and thank you to my colleagues who warmed up the technology for me. It's working great now. So today's presentation outline, I'm going to provide a brief overview and background as to the legislation changes that are impacting our budgets effective 2024. And then going through the budget phases that are now determined through that, and touching on our timetables that we're looking to bring forward to the board throughout this process. Just for some background, there has been some legislation changes to the Conservation Authority Act dating back to 2018. And the one we're touching on today, we are looking at phase 1 and 2 of the CA Act changes that really result in the mandatory programs and services that we've been discussing, that our transition plans and agreements have been addressing, and also the rules of conduct were part of phase 1. And now today I'm going to be touching on the phase 2 regulations that are supporting these. And these are really the funding mechanisms. So our budgets and processes that are meant to support our new categorization, or what's mandatory versus municipal versus an other program. So touching on these, phase 2 did come through with a number of regulations. We have gone through some of the other ones on the bottom and past, such as the fee class policies we had in 2022. Today, we're going to focus on, I just want to provide a brief update. And there's a lot of material to this, I will say, as the ministry has put forward. So I have tried to bring the presentation into scope of what will impact our operations, specifically now and into the future, and making it as relevant as possible. So with these phase 2 are geared to support the mandatory programs and services and how we actually implement that. And there's kind of 2 pieces to that through a budget and apportionment regulation that just went into effect July 1st. Same with a determination of amounts under subsection 27.2, which is really related to our duties under the Clean Water Act. So just provide a brief, I spoke too soon.
You spoke too quickly.
Oh. Do you have the mouse there, Melanie? Oh, perfect. So our budget and apportionment regulation overview. So this regulation, thanks, just come out, gone into effect on July 1st. And it's supposed to support all of our budgets from 2024 moving forward. It went into effect July 1st just to allow us to adapt our current practices to try and meet the new regulation and requirements for our 2024 budget. Myself and the leadership team and everybody's been working through a number of working sessions over the past couple of months just to try and integrate our current financial structure, our chart of accounts, timekeeping codes, and how we're going to pivot to this new budget structure. When they do reference budget, it's not only our budgets, but it is actually referencing our audited statements, our interim financial reporting, and everything holistically from there. Just want to touch on. Thank you. This is the other regulation that had recently come out, and it's to do with the Clean Water Act. So this is a new apportionment option or availability that's within the act that would provide conservation authorities the ability to include not only our partner municipalities that are sitting at the table, but our source protection members and the specified municipalities outside of our CA jurisdiction, the ability to be apportioned for our expenditures under the Clean Water Act. As of today, this is not particularly relevant. We are funded through transfer payment from the province that does support our Clean Water Act expenditures. But in the future, this is a tool within there. And I would like to note this would actually require a completely separate budget process should we go forward into an apportionment with the municipalities outside our watershed, which would then touch into the Haliburton counties, Oshawa, and Uxbridge. So we'd have to bring everyone to the table basically to work on a budget process through theirs, separate from our main budget. Again, at this time, there's no specific impact, but it's just good information with the changes. Through the budget regulation, there is 4 phases that we have to distinctly follow. The phases can be followed sequentially, or they can be followed together where appropriate. So I'll just touch through on my next slides, kind of the specific phases and how we have to go through them. So in our first phase, we are required to identify all of our sources of revenue other than apportionment, which is just referring to municipal levy, to determine what is our base revenues that will support the following year. So in 2024, and this is anything from fees, charges, donations, any reserves funding, any agreements we might have specific with an individual, an organization, or any fundraising efforts or funds gained through grants. And then here comes the part where we have to identify our costs under the new categorizations. So our category 1s, 2s, 3s, or general. Our general is the general supporting infrastructure. So it might be like finance, human resources, items that allow our other like specific areas to move forward. And at this phase, we also then we determine our reduced amounts. We'll look at our total revenues, what's our expenditures, and then that net is where we're determining what our municipality or our municipal levy or apportionment would be. This is similar to our kind of current budget process. It's just more laid out within the act of how we have to follow the process. What's new within here, though, that I would like to highlight is that within these new regulations, there's several different options on how we can apportion our budget. Historically, it's been MCVA, which I'll touch on, but now there's 2 additional options, such as benefit-based apportionment or an agreement method, which is very new. So the MCVA is how he's always apportioned our budget. Excuse me. And this is ministry supplied information. It's based on our current value assessments for the municipalities that participate, population determination, and then land coverage that falls into our watershed. As we know, not all the municipalities are 100% within our watershed. Over time, it's been steady. There's plus or minus every year as CVAs might change or populations do grow or shrink. But it has been steady. And that is how we've done with our previous operating budgets. Within this new regulation, there is also the opportunity to look at a benefits-based apportionment. There's no specific guidance on how you determine the benefits. So you can apply a benefits-based apportionment by program area or service. But where this may lead to fluctuations over years as some might determine benefits differently than others, or what's really a key driver on how you determine a benefit for, say, one program versus another. So essentially, we could work through different benefits to determine a ratio on the different programs and services. Currently, the only projects are in historical language or special projects would follow that benefits-based apportionment because our category twos are municipal programs that might just benefit one municipality. So those are 100%. But as far as our mandatory programs and services, those have been apportioned into the past. And the last option they have provided on how we can move forward in our budgets is an agreement. The agreement has limited flexibility in the sense it can only be used for some category one items, capital costs, Clean Water Act, and then just general capital costs, so not operating specifically capital. And this basically comes to a situation where you might say, well, I can do X amount and I can do Y amount, and there's not specifically a benefits driver. It's just coming to an agreement on that front. So trying to translate kind of our prior financial structure into these new regulations, where we would have our operating levy, which really a lot of our operating programs have fallen into mandatory programs and services. Some have fallen into other programs and services, such as education and some of our local environmental monitoring programs. And we have some general operating capital that our operating programs are now being shifted into. So for like a consistency approach, our modified current value is what we would use for those programs in the past. And for consistency, if we were to continue with that approach, it would help lead to consistent, more budgeting practice. An area to note for the board specifically would be Durham East Cross Forest and special operating. Through this is a conservation area that has historically been funded through agreement solely by Durham East Cross Forest, solely by the region of Durham. All of our other conservation areas have fallen under the mandatory or would fit into the mandatory. So there is an opportunity for discussion on if we go with the mandatory program and service or continue to, which would be an apportionment option, or we continue with the current existing status quo of the agreement where Durham East Cross Forest is continued to fund by Durham. And then our general benefiting. So these are some projects that we might commence that benefit the whole watershed as a whole. These would either fit into general operating or capital, or in some cases, other programs and services, such as environmental initiatives or equipment to support local environmental monitoring. These have fit under an apportionment basis of the MCVA, again, so pretty steady year over year. And the last one is our special benefiting. And as I was mentioning earlier, these are generally benefits based because we're conducting work for one municipality. So for example, it might be floodplain we've done in the past specifically for City of Kawartha Lakes, or this year we're working on for Trent Lakes floodplain mapping project. So those have been solely funded by that one municipality who's receiving the benefit. And I'm open to questions throughout for sure.
Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a lot of information.
Something just hits me, and I may be way off, so I'll ask now, so don't forget. When talking taxes, one of the things that comes up often with area rating is, one of the discrepancies, for example, with an area rating that comes up at our council, and we'll continue to, is how do you area rate something like the park? So the tax base pays for the Parks and Rec, but the Bobcaygeon votes are coming for the Trent Severn and the Useless Park.
Yeah.
Simple little analogy. I'm not here to debate. It's a conversation that happens often, right? Area rating is tricky. So to me, in some way, I guess my first question is this benefits based kind of comparable to an area rating system, and might the same issues present themselves where people are saying, yeah, it's a municipal project for that municipality, but many other municipalities benefit from the end result of that study. Is that a fair conversation that takes place, or am I way off?
No, I don't think you're way off. I would say that is a similar conversation if you go down the benefits based area versus our traditional MCVA. The benefits based does leave how do you determine the benefits, and then you do have the people passing through. I would say that conversation kind of could strike the Durham East Cross Forest one, for example, because anybody can go to Durham East Cross Forest within the watershed too. But yeah, no, I think that
Wasn't that a decision though?
Yeah.
From the board at the day of the day?
That was at the time, yes.
Yes, so that's an anomaly.
Yes.
From the board back then.
That's correct. Yeah. And that's the only one that fit that piece there. I just wanted to bring that forward to.
Just have a quick question.
Yeah.
So a scenario, let's say Halliburton County, for some reason wants to use KRCA for education. Do we have to, I mean, the province, I just don't know why the province would have a say in how we deal with that scenario. But they do, because they look at everything now, but they're not really paying for a whole lot towards conservation, but they have a big say. So I guess it's more of a comment.
Yeah, well, yeah, that one would flow through the category 3, like our educational. So it's depending on the type of education, I should say. If it's natural hazards related, it's mandatory. Other educational programs are category 3.
Yeah.
So we could still commence those programs as long as our municipalities are on board through our MOU process. And generally those are self-funded. So there would be some cost recovery from Halliburton in that case.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we could still do it.
Just a different scenario.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Quick question to the chair. Just when you look at the special operating, how does staff feel about that when you're fleshing it out? Either, is it a mandatory or is it a special? How do you guys look at that as a project?
Historically, it's been a special based on how it was decided at the time. But I think everyone like
floodplain mapping.
Yeah.
Right? That sort of thing, which is specific to.
Yeah.
So you don't want to change it, you just want to keep it as status quo?
It would be a board decision. I think
That's kind of where my
Yeah,
mind is going.
it's a
because
board
I think we're
decision.
gonna have to-
Yeah, from my standpoint, kind of where I look, it was a historic decision point, and the infrastructure is set up to be handled as a special operating. So, so from that standpoint, it is covered off. If I look at my more altruistic self, as opposed to my maybe more practical self, I look at it and say, well, realistically, it's right on the border of City of Kawartha Lakes. There's a very definite benefit for having Durham East Cross Forest. That certainly benefits Durham, certainly benefits City of Kawartha Lakes, and probably benefits the municipalities, all around, right? So pretty sure a couple of people from Cavan Monaghan probably, show up in Durham East Cross Forest. I know some travel from like Bailey-Borough to go across as well. So, a CVA approach puts everything on a single plane, which is more consistent with all of everything else that we do. But that being said, we're just respecting really a historic board decision and the current infrastructure. So, yeah.
Okay.
So ultimately,
Just a curious mind.
Yeah.
So, I would say an anomaly, if it does change, I think that's all right. It would mean increased costs for all the other municipalities as a result, with probably the biggest impact then being to City of Kawartha Lakes and relatively minor amounts for Cavan Monaghan and Trent Lakes. So.
Well, it's just around the corner from my guys, so.
Yeah, it's really on the borderline.
Yeah, it's right on the border.
Yeah, Mark's thoughts echo exactly what mine would be, but.
Okay, carry on. If anybody else.
We're good. Great. Now we're on to phase 2. So there is a draft budget and consultations phase that we have to follow through the regulations. And then through this phase, we will bring forward a draft budget to the board, which similarly will likely do, which is what we'll do for phase 1, just to follow the criteria for phase 1, you really have to do a full budget. So we'll bring a second draft budget for phase 2, essentially. But there are some components we have to include in there. Some of them are similar to the first phase. We have to identify the apportionment amounts and also provide a summary of how we considered opportunities to raise and use self-generated funds. So this might be how we looked at opportunities for grants, external revenues, technical services, et cetera. At the draft budget consultation phase, there's a vote that occurs to move the budget forward for consultation. This vote is to be done on a 1-to-1 basis, so everybody around the table has an equal vote. And at that time, we would go into consultation. After the consultation period, we have to provide, or after the approval of the draft budget, the consultation period occurs, and we would follow up with a approval of levying amounts owing. Prior to this meeting, we do have to have a notice of meeting where we provide municipalities 30 days notice, which is similar to how we have previously done 30 days notice for consultation periods as well. It's just broken out a little differently in language in this new regulation. At this time, we would have approval of our levy, which is by weighted vote. So the key piece here, this is just on our levy, and this weighted vote is throughout the different municipalities and provides level of fairness and equity based on the input that each municipality has as to the share of the total levy. After this vote's been completed, we'll provide a notice of levy to all the participating municipalities. Now, in conjunction with this is phase 4, where there's also a vote on the final budget, which is a little different than we have previously operated. So at this time, the final budget must meet the same requirements as the draft budget, and we have to conduct a approval of the final CA budget, so the budget as a whole. Within here, we do this as a 1-to-1 vote, unlike the apportionment, which is a weighted vote. There is a clause that states within the bylaws, you could use a required vote for the approval of the final budget as well, which could be a decision point for the board today as well, whether we just stick and follow towards the act, which might be more appropriate process, or we could go ahead and update our bylaws as well, which is require a revisit at those. Then we have following circulation. So the only new piece here, we've always circulated our final budgets to our participating municipalities, post to our website. They just really specifically identify it's the governance section, and also the minister is now required to receive a copy of our budget as well. So that summarizes kind of the whole budget process. And now I'm just want to provide a timetable of what we're looking for this process. So at our October 26th board meeting, we're aiming to achieve phase 1, which would be kind of budget drafting and looking at our amounts owed. November 24th, which would be our following board meeting, we look at phase 2 to do our approval of a draft budget. We'd have some input from the first meeting to tweak any or make any adjustments to the budget as needed. And then following that would bring us into our AGM, where we'd look to concurrently complete phases 3 and 4, which would be the approval or vote on our apportionment basis. This would leave the 30 days between November 24th. And then our final budget approval, which would be that 1-to-1 vote. And that's in summary, the new budget process. I'm happy to take any further questions.
Any questions? Yeah, it's a lot to take in. Just okay, so maybe the question is, what are the salient changes from how we do business now through the budget process? What are the big changes that the province has?
I would say the big one is just from an administration standpoint on restructuring all of our current financials to adapt into the category 1, 2s, and 3s, and really getting through that process.
Yeah.
And it just as a smaller organization too, right? We do have, we could have now a person who's working in category 1, 2, and 3. So we're just putting out the individuals and making sure we're budgeting for them in the right places.
Yeah.
Is one piece. And then there's just some few like the different budgetary steps. And I think looking into the future, our auditing process will likely see increased costs as well, just as we have to realign our past expenditures.
Okay, Lloyd. Sorry, that. I'm sorry, Harold. No, I've got, no. Jerry, sorry.
With your expertise, do you see this as an improvement or detriment, or is it even moving in the right direction? On a personal note, I'm not holding you to the flame, but just your overview. Is it going in the right direction, or is it just more bureaucracy? Make it personal.
Can answer that.
That's an interesting question. Through you, Madam Chair. It's I think we'll still be able to do the good work we're doing. I think there's just more of a process with the MOUs that have been put forward on us, but at the end of the day, as long as municipalities are able to support us and we can support them, we can still get towards our ends initiatives, but it's been an administrative exercise to get through towards 2024 and beyond.
Okay, Eric?
Does an organization like BDO, who's BDO done what do you think you were with. So are you in contact with BDO? Just curious on route too to help you through this so that those audits aren't a big giant mess of, oh, now it's this, and it costs an enormous sum of money. Like are those chats kind of ongoing too? Like you guys are gonna probably want to do this, and this.
Yeah.
I would imagine.
Through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, interestingly enough, I was on a call with some of my neighboring conservation authorities the other week, and they're also with BDO. So the advantage we do have is there's quite a few of us going through the same thing. We have a firm that's experienced with conservation authorities. There hasn't been the advanced discussions as of right yet, but it has been out there. I know CFO over at Lake Simcoe, he had some initial chats. I'm wondering, okay, should we pull, like, before we get into it, let's pull some of us into a room and talking with BDO partner there, Adam. See, like, yeah. So we're thinking about how we get there.
Okay. Anybody else? Kriya? No? Great. Well, thank you very much. And yeah, there's a lot to take in. And I guess it's made your job a little harder also. But adaptable.
Yeah,
for you.
sure.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
So the next step is the supporting budget overview document. So that is one that John and I have been working on, as well as the rest of the leadership team. We are looking at a 2.5% municipal operating levy increase. Again, as John said, once it's all kind of shook out and kind of realigned to the current budget framework. There is a resolution that's presented, which is the 2.5% as a general guideline for us moving forward. And that is tied in with all of the presentation that John just provided, which is to align the budget process in accordance with the regulations. I will add that I know that our chair, Rock, was not able to attend today, but we do have a prep meeting before this. So there's a couple of what you would have heard as a couple of almost decision points to make as we go through the budget process. So he wanted to make sure that there was some good discussion on that. I think we've had some discussion on that, but he wanted to make sure that the discussion was invited for two aspects. One was, do we use the benefit-based approach or the MCVA approach in order to portion out the budget so that there's a kind of base going forward when we draft a budget. And tied in with that was the consideration of Durham East Cross Forest as continuing the way it is, or does it get rolled into the MVCA approach if that's chosen, or kind of rolled in with the rest of it, which would be a benefits-based or agreement approach. So I think those are a couple of important decision points kind of moving forward. I know as staff, we would recommend the MVCA approach because that's the way we apportion things out currently. And if we do choose a different route, then basically we have a low budget for each and every single item because it's by project or service, right? So that would well, John would be even busier, but then that would also be reflected back in all the audit statements and everything else. So there's a whole chain that kind of rolls through from there. And tied in with that was Durham East Cross Forest. Our recommendation is that at this point it is kind of organized by the structure. We do understand that there's some security issues that we're still dealing with on East Cross Forest. So we're suggesting at this point, there's the infrastructure set up for a method other than MVCA, which is by agreement is what we understand it to be currently. Not necessarily a benefit-based approach, because I don't think that necessarily applies. So, and the other part is the voting at the end, which is, do we update our bylaw or do we just go according to the regs? So staff recommendation on that was go by the regs. We'll have 2 votes, and then that's how we'll approve the budget.
So we're still going to have special benefiting.
Yes.
But whether or not you want to put Durham East Cross Forest into just everybody benefiting, right? So that's the question.
The exception.
Yeah. So that's
exception or not. Yeah.
Right. So that's the choice that we need to make, whether or not you want to change that. As Tracy said, it's like right next door to where she lives. Eric?
I think the MVCA model is the way to go with the forest being that anomaly, you know, the middle category for all of the three. For me, I just, if I hate to use silly analogies, but if your house is flooded, it's not the time to go on a diet. You know what I mean? Those are two things you need to do maybe, but I think you keep eating your cheeseburgers until you get the house. Right now, this is, you know, we have an exceptional presentation, people who are coping and doing very best they can with other watersheds and other groups and making phone calls. And how can we make this work? It's been the positive messaging that I've heard from the Conservation Authority from day one. How can we make this work? Not rebuttals and anger. It's been, okay, so we're moving. How do we do it? And to keep as many consistencies as possible in place in this time, to me, it just makes really good sense.
Tracy?
Oh, absolutely, through you as well. And, you know, it's just weighing at that balance of expense, right? And, you know, revenue, when you look at the whole picture when it comes to that particular model as well.
Carol?
Yeah, just on interest on that subject. This was set up this way as a decision of a previous board. Does anybody recall any specific reasons why it was done that way?
Yes. But I don't know whether or not I want to speak to that, but there was one of the board members really didn't like the whole idea of purchasing land. And so I think it snowballed into that from, a certain municipality. It's about it. If maybe you would like to expand on that.
You did a great job.
I kind of, in a nutshell, I mean, it was a kind of philosophical a decision, which, you know, I didn't think was fair, but I wasn't on the board at that time. I was on council, but I wasn't on the board. But anyway, that's just a little bit of history.
So I have a question.
Oh, sorry, Kriya?
So right now you have the choice between the two models or the three so will you always have that choice, or eventually will the budgeting per project be the way it's going to have to go, just because of the changes to the how we work with municipalities? So the ones and the twos, et cetera. Are they going to want to see that? Are they going to want to itemize like that?
So maybe what I'll do is I'll start and I'll just see if John confirms what I'm thinking. Maybe I should just go to John, but I'm going to take a stab anyway. My thought on that is the option will always exist.
Okay.
Because it's written in the regulation. Until the regulations change, that will be the order of the day. So I think it will always be the option to switch about depending on whatever budget we're going with on the current year. So realistically, we almost probably need to reconfirm a resolution every year just to make sure we're on the right footing. So that's kind of, when you ask the question, that's kind of where I land.
Yeah.
But maybe I'll just double check with John and see if that's his take.
No, that's the same way I understand it. It's an ongoing, it's not a point in time, it's a recurring opportunity.
It can be managed. Peter? I think Peter.
Through you, Chair. I believe you're right. I was on the board at that time, and there was one particular member that was adamant against purchasing property for East Kawartha.
Or just period, purchasing property. It just so happened that came up. Yeah. Jerry?
Chair, with my lack of experience, there must be pros and cons to both because they're two separate items. Could you kind of give me some insight into what the pros and cons would be of either or?
Through you, Madam Chair, for us as an organization, I would say it just comes down to like a philosophical thing. Premise, we're still servicing Durham East Cross Forest. I think it comes down to municipal budget, as if we did switch from that agreement to where Durham East Cross Forest is solely funded by the region, that would then get apportioned out between all municipalities. So Durham East Cross Forest budget about 60th. It's around 60% apportionment is City of Kawartha Lakes, 35 is Durham, 4 and change, and then another 0.5% or so between Cavan and Trent Lakes. So it would just be, that would be an increase to your expenditures. It would be a moving of expense between. So as far as like an operational pros and cons, I can't Yeah.
The public has no idea.
Yeah.
The public has no idea how it's happening. It makes no difference to them.
They just use it.
They just use it and they don't know any of the fine tunings behind it, so.
When you try to bring in that bigger spectrum, like if you gotta go to all the people outside of the region to get some kind of consensus, that sounds like something that's just gonna stall.
Well, we don't have to go, we'd have to go here to the board.
Yes.
And so whether or not there's an appetite at the board, I guess that's the big thing, whether or not there's an appetite to support it. And then it's just the changing of the amounts and recognizing that on top of whatever increase we have in our budget, there's also this other thing that's going to increase your budget.
And then that would follow up with a decision at the board would then be part of the consultation on the budget with municipalities. So there's then the opportunity to receive the comments from municipalities on the budget, and then the board would then work with the information that comes back and either modify or approve the amounts as you kind of run out the process.
So we have some resolutions, but so it wouldn't be, and that Durham East Cross Forest is apportioned to the region of Durham, right? It would be just general benefiting, right?
So there's.
We have some resolutions here.
So if, and again, like this is a lot of, kind of stuff to kind of think about. So we will be providing a draft budget as we go out into September, October. If we have to, we'll bring something back in September to just to renew the conversation, or it could be October. But really, what it amounts to is landing on these points. So if you're not comfortable today, then I totally understand that, because this is a lot to kind of absorb. But we did draft some just based on my discussions with Chair Rock on those components. And I can read them out for you if that helps.
They don't have the.
No, don't have
Okay.
that. Yeah.
I'm just thinking maybe because of that, it's better to read it, I think, that maybe we should put that off. Just because it's been a lot of information. And I think we've kind of got over a hurdle today on the philosophical aspect. So that's a big step, I think. So if you don't mind.
No problem. We'll produce a short report in September that
Right
just outlines this component of it, and just outlines that, and then that'll provide us some lead time for October in case we need to change anything in terms of how things are presented in the draft budget. So.
Great. So I guess we just need a resolution to receive John's report, please. Eric and Harold, all in favor? Carried.
Sorry. In order for us to continue to work on the budget, though, if we have a guideline, that'd be really tremendous.
Okay.
Which is the in the budget overview is the existing resolution.
Okay, sorry. I'm just kind of looking for that resolution here. Where is that?
Yep.
You've got it all greened out. So sorry.
The greens are the resolutions. So,
Yeah.
This piece
Just
is
the first two.
Yeah, just-
Okay. All righty. So, okay, Jerry, you had a question?
Oh, I
You had your hand.
was voting on your last issue, but
Okay.
I didn't know which way to vote.
Okay, so, resolve that staff bring forward a draft budget considering a 2.5 municipal operating levy increase based on the current operating levels, economic climate and municipal guidelines, and that staff align the budget process with Ontario Regulation 402/22 in accordance with the actions and timetable presented. So, okay, Jerry, you wanted to do that?
I'll make that.
Okay, Peter, and do I have a seconder? Tracy? So any conversation? Yeah,
Just
Harold?
on that second part of that,
Yeah,
in accordance with actions, but that specifically just refers to the timetable, right?
yes,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And then.
okay,
And that's also the categorization so the way we organize our budget currently by department would be split out by programs and service, by the programs, service, mandatory, the
category 2, 1, 2, 3.
Okay, yes, that's
And
close ones, okay. Sure with that.
Okay, any other questions? Call the question, all in favor? Carried, great. Okay, so now we're on to 7, staff report, 7.1, permits issued by designated staff, May and June. Matt?
Thank you, and to you, Madam Chair. That's found on page 25 of the agenda. The total number of issued permits by designated staff were 42 and 53 permits in June. Both months are significantly improved in comparison to April, where a total of 27 permits were issued. During May and June, we have been adjusting our processes to improve our performance in order to better meet our timelines. And going forward, we are evaluating how we can separate duties and streamline the permit process further. Additionally, we currently have a permitting analyst position vacant and are in the process of filling the position in the coming weeks. Reviews are anticipated to occur next week. Regarding the permits by designated staff, we are seeking resolution that the section 28 permits issued by staff have been received. Thank you.
Okay, any questions of Matt? Kriya?
It is a small question, reading through them. I noticed in 2 situations, wetlands permits. A small portion of a wetlands was taken up by a dwelling. And in another case, I guess there was a trade. I hadn't noticed those, but they're probably always under permit. Right? How many typically are there under the wetland?
Well, Matt would be able to describe those permits very specifically.
Those very 2 have gone through court approval previously.
Oh, they're the ones that
We're just finalizing details to get them issued with the applicants.
those are the ones we talked about last.
Yeah.
I just wondered if they're always coming up.
I prefer not.
Yeah, okay. Because I mean, they're wetlands and we're talking about climate change and I understand you helped me go through why that had to be permitted last time, but it's not great, right? They're literally filling in a wetland. And, we talk about wetlands. But so anyway, thanks for clarifying that.
Any other questions? Okay, I have a question. So do we have any data from like last year compared to this year? Maybe it was in there and I missed it. It was a pretty big agenda. Like, how are we doing, I guess, is the bottom line in dealing with permits. And I know we're down 1 staff member. Is somebody filling in to help out, making things move a little quicker?
Yes, so we're comparable to last year at this time. I don't know the exact number. I didn't do that review yet.
Yeah.
However, we are getting a lot of support from internal staff to help us prepare the permits and like I said, we're trying to streamline the process a bit better and doing some separation of duties so that there's less confusion and thing at once. Yes.
Yes. Good.
And I think the other thing that you might have noted in the CIO report, but I'll just mention it here, is that we're actively looking at getting someone in this position as soon as possible.
Yeah, I saw that. That's why I asked. Yeah.
Yeah, so we did actually have to extend the advertisement for that position. We didn't
Get anybody.
receive what we were looking for in terms of qualified candidates for that position. So we did extend it, but my understanding is that we are looking at the pool of candidates now and are looking to schedule some interviews. So, so hopefully that'll be filled fairly soon.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have a kind of a motion to receive the report, or have I done that already? Kriya, have a seconder. Okay, Harold, all in favor? Carried, great.
And Madam Chair, I have a couple of very attentive staff and they're looking at things. So so they did mention 6.1.1 for the climate change report. We do need a resolution.
Oh, kiddo. All right. I thought we did that climate change report. No? Okay. Obviously didn't. Okay, a motion to receive the climate change report from John Chambers. And I thought we did that for sure, but anyway. Okay, okay, Tracy and a seconder. Okay, Jerry, all in favor? Carried, Thank you. There. Happy?
Very.
Okay.
Rosemel too.
Okay, all right, so now okay, so that motion, should I actually read all that, or I guess I don't really need to do that? We did the permitting, okay, so now we're on to 7.1, strategic actions update. Mark.
All right, so I'll keep this fairly short. And just from the standpoint of a lot of the information, the current information has been highlighted in my CRO reports. So some of the most current information in the current report, and of course in the past, the other ones. So this is a much more, I would say, detailed look at some of the specific actions that we've done supporting our strategic plan. And our directors are here to answer any questions that you might have in addition to myself.
Any questions? All the great things that you're doing out there. It's great. Yeah, so I'm excited that we're going to be part of the health committee that Sue brought forward and is forming now, and there'll be people from the city, so that's great. So I'm looking forward to that. So I guess just a motion to receive, please. Okay, Kriya, seconder, Harold, all in favor? Carried, great. Okay. Cooking with gas here. Okay, now we're into the interim financial statement. Jonathan.
Madam Chair, I'd just like to provide a brief update on our financial status as of May 31st. Just provide the board with an update on our progress as to where we are in the year. At May 31st, we're early into the year, so a lot of our projects haven't fully commenced, as we do require the nice weather to maintain our parks and complete some restoration initiatives. But I will go through our operating budget and touch on special projects. I will start to say at this time, everything looks to be on track and on track for the budget. In the Planning and Development Services Department, we are right on schedule for revenues anticipated for the year. We're still seeing really high volumes, as you noted in Matt's report, on permit and planning applications coming through. There's some economic uncertainty as we carry through the year, and there being continually increasing interest rates. So we've been waiting to see, like, where's that going to impact things, and where's the interest rates going to land. Department expenditures are on track for 2023 budget right now. We have seen reduced expenditures on labor and increased expenditures on consultants as we have looked to backfill our watershed resources engineer. This time we are anticipating that the expenditures will be outpacing the revenue at the year end on that front. We are getting our engineer up to speed and taking on some applications now as we wean off the consultants. Through IWM, Nancy's department, they've seen a really great year on their innovation hub. Lots of uptake, increased revenues there. We've also seen steady funding from them in RF, which is great to see on our transfer payment for our flood forecasting. And we did secure some seasonal grant revenues to support our summer students, approximately $10,000 for the IWM department, which covers about half of their expenses for seasonal staff. Through stewardship and conservation lands, their main projects are just starting throughout this field season, but everything seems to be on track. Their financials at this time. I did want to clarify that the habitat compensation program, while we had budgeted for $40,000 in revenue in 3 projects, we are commencing 3 projects. There was a recognition of one of those projects' revenues that occurred last year, and that flowed through to our reserves. So we aren't going to see that full revenue recognition for that department this year. Our net financial impact year over year is the same. It just went into the reserves a bit earlier than we had anticipated. We did hire, we had a collaboration with First Nation, where we were able to receive a training opportunity and have a employee come in for the summer at no cost to Kawartha Conservation, which was great. And through corporate services, everything appears to be on financial track right now. As I mentioned, interest rates continue to rise, and they've exceeded what we were originally anticipating. So good if you have cash in the bank and no debt. So right now we don't have any debt at Kawartha Conservation. With these increased interest rates, we're anticipating approximately $30,000 to $40,000 additional interest income this year, which will support our bottom line. And through the special projects, we have 3 floodplain mapping projects that are in process. We're completing the City of Kawartha Lakes project and just wrapped up the NDMP funding that was supported from the Falls South. We're anticipating to bring that forward to the board at a following meeting. And we are also getting going on Trent Lakes, 2 projects there, continuing our efforts with the Alberta floodplain mapping. Everything, again, financially appears to be on track at this stage of the game. Beyond that, we had seen, I just want to touch, we had seen strong support for our tree seeding program this year and beat revenue targets there. Sale. Beyond that, levy recognition has been recognized as of May 31st, and our expenditures are generally incurred evenly throughout the year regarding staffing. However, some of our project-based expenses are concentrated in this middle section of the year. So we'll likely see those hitting our next financial update in the fall. With that,
great.
Do you have any questions?
Thank you. Any questions for John? No? Okay. Can I have a motion to receive his report, please? Eric? Tracy? All in favor? Carrie. Great. Thank you. Okay, and now we're down to Mark with CAO report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just highlight a couple of actions over, between last board meeting and this one. As you've heard from John, there's been a lot of work on the budget side of things, reframing really how we do our business related to anything financial. That's really the end impact of what we've been doing, other than our base processes. So that's stayed the same, but within that, there's a whole bunch of movement. So that's going to culminate with a bunch of training sessions with staff as we roll out kind of how we record our time into the future, what codes do you code everything to as purchases are made. So it really is a fundamental, I would say, change in terms of the impact on people in the organization, and just have to be adaptable to a new way of doing business. And also on the MOU front, I've been meeting with your watershed staff, your municipal staff, and so I've been to Trent Lakes, I've been to City of Kawartha Lakes. I know it's on the agenda coming up in August. The MOUs, a bit of an introduction to them. So there's a fair bit of movement. Durham Region has the agreement, and they're looking at it with their staff or their complement of people that are reviewing agreements, and actually have a meeting with Cavan Monaghan as well with the CAO next week. So things are moving on that front in order to try and get the MOUs aligned. As we move out, I'll leave that for later. So as we move out, there's a fair bit of work to do in order to get the MOUs. The date that we're looking at, of course, is January 1st, 2024. There is a Conservation Ontario meeting that was held as well in June, at the end of June, and that's hosted by Conservation Ontario and comprises all the reps for each of the CAs. So they're always interesting meetings. There was a governance, accountability, and transparency review that was done. So they looked at all the CA's websites and looked at all the requirements, a lot of it in the information requirement, right? Which is all the new stuff that we had to do in terms of a governance webpage and forwarding our audits to the minister, having it on our website. So they did a pretty good job of that, and so it showed that we're largely compliant as a group of CAs, and we never got contacted by Conservation Ontario saying that we need to do something more. So that means I would say that means that we did pretty good, which is awesome. So thanks to of course the team for doing a great job on that. And interestingly, there's a bunch of subcommittees that Conservation Ontario has, which is really comprised of experts in different areas. And so there's a conservation, I won't use the acronym, the Provincial Offences Officer crew. And so what they do is it never gets old, I tell you. But what they do is they're a bunch of experts on the section 28 and 29 fronts. And what they do is they actually try and improve process. So they've been working for actually quite a number of years on standard operating procedures. So they've come out with 14 of them, which I did identify some of the major categories of those. And so we are going to look at taking those and adopting them as a part of our SOPs.
Are they allowed to enter properties now? The officers?
We're allowed to enter, but there's a lot of rules around how specifically we can enter. So currently, only if it's an imminent danger can we enter property without like a search warrant or approval of the landowner. So there's very specific criteria.
Section 28, so they still don't have all the powers they want.
No, and quite frankly, like I don't mind around a lot of it. There's no resolution on what makes imminent. So to me, that's a bit of a gap. So you're always, open, it has to be tested essentially in the courts to get there. But I don't mind if there's rules and processes to be in play because people's personal property. So it makes sense, right, that contact ahead of time. And we have to do that for all work that we do, actually, even if we go out to someone's property for environmental monitoring or something like that, or stewardship. We still have to have permissions.
Sometimes there are no buildings on the property and there's no address yet, and so that makes it.
Yes, it can. Yes, yeah, because it's a numbered company sometimes when that occurs. So that does make it a little bit more difficult, but you have to show the process that you tried to go through that way of notifying. So. But there is, we do have buildings. The most important thing on that front, as a bit of a side note, is stop work orders. We don't have that. It's written in there, but that would be great. And standard set fines versus having to go to the courts. I think those are probably the two big ones on the section 28 front that would make our life easier.
Yeah.
So as it is right now, if we charge someone, it would go through the courts, and that's about at the lowest end about 15, 20. At the high end, it could be it can be a whole lot more.
Okay.
And if you want
Keep going
there. Yeah, so John did a great job of outlining, kind of the thought process behind our communication. So that's highlighted there. A kind of exciting piece too, something else that John's been working on, as well as with Chair Rock, is the Two Bloke Cider. So we have a new partnership with them, which is pretty awesome. It's a seasonal cider. In collaboration with them that has some of our branding on the cans, and we do get some proceeds as well from sales. So that's tremendous. And in the interest of speeding things along, I will just update a couple of pieces. Like for instance, our IT is doing great thanks to all the work from our IT person, Warren. We've got cloud backups. My understanding from discussions with him and John is that it's saving us money now and gives us a lot more flexibility in our backup points. So that's some really good work. Source water protection, there's a whole bunch of legislative kind of updates occurring. The technical rules were changed, so it's in a consultation period right now. So that's happening right now with some of your staff at your municipality. So they'll be tuned into that. And I'll just highlight one other thing, which is the water fund is completed. So we've had, I think if my math works right, 33 projects with about $75,000 that were provided to landowners, and that resulted in about $250,000 of investment from the community. So some really good leveraging of dollars with a little bit of help from our end. So tremendous, and that improves agricultural land, rural land, urban projects, and then a couple of community projects in the City of Kawartha Lakes as well. Just different structuring of that program. So maybe I'll leave it there and see if there's any questions.
Any questions? Okay, so can I have a motion to receive the CAO's report, please? Okay, Harold. Seconder, Gary. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, so we're on to 7.4 correspondence. Page 73 to 87. So are there any questions on the any of the correspondence? Nope. Okay, I need a motion to receive that, please. Eric, Jerry, all in favor? Carried. Great. Okay, so we're on to the big meaty ones here, another more meaty ones. Okay, 8.1, the CA Act transition report. Mark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this report is really recognizing we canceled the meeting in June. That's when we had a progress report due to the ministry. So we did provide that, and the report's attached. It indicates the current progress on the MOUs. And so that's just looking for essentially a ratification that the report is available, and that has been forwarded on to our member municipalities and the province. So that is really the summation of that report. We'll confirm with municipal staff in terms of guidelines moving forward, but so far it looks like, as it was at the very beginning, that we might need an extension for the agreements, and that's Durham Region that indicated that to us, at the very first steps, and I think we're still on track for that. Still have to talk to Cavan Monaghan in terms of timing, but otherwise it looks like pretty much everyone else thinks that we might be able to achieve the January 1st, 2024 deadline. So.
Eric?
I was just wondering if that would be spoken to a council in August too.
Yes, through Madam Chair, in August, it'll be an indication of the framing of what the MOU is intended to look like, but not necessarily the MOU itself for any approvals.
Okay, any other questions? Can I have a motion to receive the report, please? Priya, seconder, Tracy, all in favor? Carried. Okay. Guys, here we go. 8.2 land acquisition and disposition policy. And now that we've made that big decision, Christy, go for it.
Thank you. So a few years ago, we had an interim policy that was passed and that we've been functioning off of with regards to land securement. But now with the changes in the CA Act, with the update to our strategic plan, there's a couple of different triggers now that have put us in a situation where we really need to adopt a land acquisition and disposition policy that sort of lays out the framework for, when would we consider properties for purchase or for donation, how would we secure properties, and then if we're looking to dispose of any lands, what would be the process or under what circumstances would we do so? So I pulled together a bit of a policy on those pieces that is attached. I'm happy to answer any questions with regards to the content.
Any questions? Eric?
The only one that's jumped out at me, and it only did is because of something Kriya said earlier. Sorry, Kia is the name of our.
Yeah. I just did that earlier. Yeah.
And it was just about it was part, I found it out, significant wildlife habitat. So it seemed obvious to me. And then hearing though that these acquisitions do happen, we come back each month and someone has taken, there's been a purchase of particular habitat that maybe, obviously had good reason and it was all approved and so on. But where does that fit? Like, will there be, is there a search for this significant wildlife habitat that's not going, and it's a proactive sort of, if we get on this now, or is it more as it happens and it's secondary to a land purchase that you want to make? Am I making sense?
You absolutely are, and it's a little bit of both.
Okay.
So we do have, in some circumstances, especially around Durham East Cross Forest, we have sort of a land securement strategy that has sort of identified those key properties that we want to acquire to sort of close some of the gaps with, because it's very parceled out.
Like you showed us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When it comes to acquiring new properties, unassociated with the properties that we already own, then those are sort of done on an ad hoc basis. So when a landowner approaches us, or a donor approaches us and wants to secure a specific property, then we start to investigate that and take a look at all of the natural heritage features on it at that point in time. So a little bit of both.
Just say,
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Do you think that we'll ever get back to Kawartha naturally connected? Because it's so important.
So we do use it through our land securement strategy. So as our land securement process.
Mhm.
So as properties become available, that is one of the pieces that we look at is, was it identified through Kawartha's naturally connected?
Okay.
So we are using it in a sort of an official format.
Yeah.
To inform some of the natural heritage plan.
I'm just wondering if that group would ever get together, or is the work being done anyway?
I think, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the work has been done largely.
Yeah.
And now it's just a case of whether or not they can have that natural heritage strategy approved by different municipalities as sort of the level or the.
Like an official plan.
As an official plan type.
Because we're doing our official, update and stuff, and that would be the avenue to do that,
Yeah.
right? Okay, thank you.
And just further to that, Madam Chair, is I was sitting on that committee with the other members from the other areas, and I think there was a general understanding that everything had to kind of work out in the different groups for it to, basically become part of operating business. So I think that's essentially where it landed. However, there were some difficulties in getting it incorporated to official plans, for instance. So Peterborough did do that. They incorporated it and it got rejected actually by the province.
Oh, really?
Yes, so they did not accept that. They said, use our natural heritage strategy. So there were some difficulties in implementation as it.
So we could try, but they'll probably shut us down if we tried that in Kawartha Lakes. Okay. No, should try anyway. Okay, great. So any questions for Christy? Any more questions? No? Okay, can we have a motion to receive a report, please? Jerry and Peter, all in favor? Carrie, great. Okay. So any new business? So we're on to 10. Any reports or updates from any of the members? Want to share anything with Peter?
Yeah, I'd like to thank Tanner Liang. He did a video presentation at North Pigeon Lake Cottage or Lake Associates, not a cottage association anymore. And it was exploring the drivers that shape the water quality of Pigeon Lake. It was well received and it was very well done. Like that, thank you to both to Tanner.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll be sure to pass that on. Yeah, it's a good presentation stuff.
Yeah.
Anything else anybody wants to share? No? Okay. And so that's it. Can I have a motion to adjourn, please? Tracy and. Okay, all in favor, Carrie.
Waiting for another one. Get 9 or 10.
I know. I'm looking to the right more often, sorry. There we go. Anyway, thanks a lot. You made it easy today. Thank you. Sorry, Jerry, I mucked up your name earlier on.
Good job, Councilor Warren.